Hello everyone, hello occultists, hello heathens, hello witches, whatever type of magical practitioner you are. I have been dying to do a bookshelf tour for a really long time, but I'm calling it a full library tour because I do have quite a few books, all of which are not pictured right now on the screen, but I'm hoping to quickly breeze through all these books and just kind of talk about which ones have been really instrumental in my magical practice, which ones I would quickly recommend. Obviously on my channel, I have tons of book recommendations where I go way more in depth on my recommendations and why I like particular books. So this video, because there's so many books that I'm going to be going through, it's really going to be a quick like one sentence thing about the books that I really enjoy. And I do personally enjoy obviously all of the copies of books that I have. So I don't know how long this video is going to be. I'm going to try to keep it somewhat short, but I have a feeling this is probably going to be longer than my normal videos. I also have another bookshelf not pictured on the screen right now, but we will go look at that as well. And if you don't already know who I am, my name is Ivy. I am the occultist here on YouTube and Instagram. Feel free to add me on Instagram if you like. I will drop the handle in the description box as well as up on the screen. And before we get into this occult library tour, I actually counted my books because I was like, okay, how many books do I actually have? And it turns out I have 302 paper copies, or hardbacks and paper copies, and then I have 120 audiobooks and Kindle books. So the 120 books that I have in the electronic version, I'm not going to be talking about today. I am just going to be talking about the 302 books that I have actual physical copies of. So there are so many other books that I would like to recommend, but hopefully this will be a good starting place. But let's dive into some occult books. Okay, so we are in my witchy workspace right now, and I wanted to show you the bookshelf that I have in here real quick. Eventually, I would love to give you a tour of this witchy room, but everything else is chaotic in here. You usually see me in this room when I'm filming most of my videos. I'm sure most of you recognize the backdrop. But here's a quick look of my witchy space. Got a lot of crystals up in here. And then I have a bookshelf that sits way up top. So I wanted to discuss these books first before we go downstairs to the books that you just saw on all my shelves in my living room. So let's talk about these books. Breezing through these books really quick, these are the books that I like to have in my magical workspace as quick reference guides, ones that I really use often in my magical practice. Now, and I apologize if the camera is shaking. This is very, very high up, so I'm having to hold my camera with two hands right now. But up on the left, we have all of my books for Planetary Magick, Lunar Magic, and Astrology. I do plan to make a video at some point for all the astrology books that I would recommend and why. I'm not really going to be going into that in this video because there's so many different branches of astrology and planetary magic. It would take up way too much time in this video to discuss which ones are my favorite, because it really just depends on how you are going to use astrology and planetary magic in your practice. There are a lot of different ways to do that. So there is my astrology planetary magic section. And then we move to Llewellyn's complete books. So Llewellyn's is a publication company, and they have so many occult and witchy books. So I have some of their complete books. They have a whole series that are called like the Complete Book of Correspondences, the Complete Book of Lucid Dreaming. They have all these books, the Complete Book of Names. So I have this section here, Llewellyn's Complete Book of Correspondences, the orange book in the center. I wish I could point to it right now. That book I use all the time. So if you are using correspondences, physical correspondences in your magical practice, I highly recommend getting this book because it's so nice to have. It's so well researched, and there is just an abundance of correspondences. You can find stuff for pretty much anything you need. So if you're doing like a money or a prosperity spell or something, you would literally just look up money or prosperity, and that book would show you all the different correspondences that you can use in your spells. It'll tell you the herbs, the colors, the planets associated with money or prosperity, and there's gods and goddesses in there as well. So there's quite a bit. I do love the Llewellyn's Lucid Dreaming book as well. I found that one was really helpful. The only complete books that I didn't care for, on the left you might see Llewellyn's Complete Book of Astrology and Llewellyn's Complete Book of Predictive Astrology. I didn't care for those books. The wording you know what, that's going to be a video another day. We're going to talk, I already mentioned we're going to talk about astrology later. So anyways, the Llewellyn's Book of Correspondences, definitely invest yourself in that one. And then we move over to the Western and Eastern Mysteries. I've mentioned these books in my Occult 101 video. I highly, highly recommend these books because they cover a wide range of magical practices. So if you are just entering the occult world, these books are great to have because it's kind of like an encyclopedia of every magical tradition you could possibly imagine. Obviously, the Western Mysteries refers to the Western world. Eastern Mysteries refers to the Eastern world. So highly, highly recommend getting those books. And then, of course, we move on to the 3 books of occult philosophy and also the 4th book of occult philosophy by Henry Cornelius Agrippa. These books are absolute staples in any occult practice. I've talked about these books a little bit in my Occult 101 video, and I'm actually going to link that video down below because that really does talk about kind of the starter books that I would recommend for a beginner occultist. And I also had talked about the Golden Dawn, I talked about the Occult book, I talked about the Kabbalion. All of these books towards the end here I feel like are staples for a beginner occultist. If you are not aware, the Golden Dawn was an organization that existed that was instrumental in shaping a lot of other magical practices that exist today. So if you're looking to get more into ceremonial magic, definitely recommend looking into the Golden Dawn or branches off from the Golden Dawn. And I also recommend the Kabbalion to everyone because it is essentially the basis of Hermeticism. Well, it's supposed to be. I've talked about this book quite a bit as well, so I won't go in depth in this video, but I love the Kabbalion. I think it's really important to understand the principles of Hermeticism because it is the basis of a lot of magical traditions. Like witchcraft, for example, does have a lot of influence from Hermeticism. So I think every witch should read the Kabbalion. I think that every occultist should read the Kabbalion. So definitely an important book. It's also a very controversial book. So there's a lot of people that hate this book. So you either love it or you hate it. But that's kind of the books that I have on my top shelf here that I reference quite a bit. But let's go downstairs and we'll go back into my living space and I'll show you the other books. Okay, so we are back in my living room now. Let's start with this top shelf here, and then we will work our way down to the second shelf, if you can see that, work our way across here, and then I will show you the giant bookcase that is right next to me, kind of over here. We'll go through all this. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's start here. This is my little green man tree. Not that you asked for this, but I have to show you. He has like little gnomes on it, which I think is so adorable. You know, they're like all doing different things up here. It makes me happy. Anyway, so that's my green man tree. Had to show you that, but okay, back to books. Starting with this top shelf, these are all my books on shamanism and kind of indigenous practices, I would say. I am very much into learning about the Celts, the Druids, all of Celtic myth and religion. So you can see on the right over here are all my books about Celtic culture. And then I also have some Northern magic as well up at the top that goes into more Scandinavian indigenous practices as well. The book on earthing that you see right here, I recommend that to anyone everywhere. It's not really a book on shamanism or indigenous practices. I just put it in this section because I feel like it fits those practices very well. But this book on earthing, it's an older book. I'm not sure when it was written, but I highly recommend it because it talks about how to connect yourself to the earth. There is an exchange of free-flowing electrons that happens when you step outside barefoot on the grass, and there are a lot of medicinal benefits from it. You can use it spiritually, physically, emotionally, and it actually kind of goes into the science a little bit behind earthing and why it does the things it does for us. So I definitely recommend everyone read this earthing book if you haven't already. I feel like it's kind of a staple in every spiritual practice. It's not necessarily magic related, but it is very, very spiritual. So I love that book. And then this stack over here is my straight up up shamanism books. I kind of touched on these a little bit in that Occult 101 video as well. The book in the middle called Earth Magick by Stephen D. Farmer, that is my favorite book on shamanism. And so if you're interested in getting into shamanism and you are a beginner with that subject, I definitely recommend checking out that Earth Magick book. It is a lovely introduction. It's very comprehensive. I love how it's written. There's exercises in there. And then once you get a little bit more, you know, serious about shamanism, you might want to move to some of the classics here. We've got that big red shamanism book in the center, Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy, I believe is the title. That's another book that's considered a staple within shamanism that a lot of other books basically refer to because it's such a staple. I think it's a Princeton classic as well, so very important book to have if you're interested in deep diving into shamanism. And then the two books at the top, I have Animal Spirit Guides and Animal Speak. Those are the two books that I would recommend if you're looking into Animal Spirit Guides. I use both of those books side by side. I feel like each one kind of has their own angle, and it's really nice to have the descriptions from both together. So I can't really say if I have a favorite between the two, but I do love both of these books for Animal Spirit Guides. But let's move on to the next section. So this series here, I feel like most people are already familiar with. It's Llewellyn's Sabbat Essentials. And so there is a book for each Sabbat of the Wheel of the Year. I love these books so much, and I refer back to them every single year. Every single Sabbat, there is so much history in them. There's recipes, activities, rituals that you can do for every Sabbat. So these are definitely my favorite books when it comes to the wheel of, like the Wiccan Wheel of the Year or the Pagan Sabbats. Definitely check out these books if you are interested in celebrating the Sabbats because they are absolutely worth it. And then moving over a little bit further, we have all of my books on Kabbalah that you can see here. I did do a video on Hermetic Kabbalah and I discussed these books in a lot more detail. So if you are interested in Kabbalah or Kabbalah, I will link that video down below, and you can learn a little bit more about all of these books and why I would recommend them, which ones are best for beginners, etc. And then we have my section on divination. So I have palmistry on the bottom. I've also talked about this book on my channel, Best Book for Palmistry. It is The Art and Science of Hand Reading by, I think it's Ellen Goldberg. And then we have some tarot books as well. That holistic tarot book I've also talked about on this channel. I apologize for being so repetitive with my books, but I am very passionate about the ones I like. This holistic tarot book by Benabel Wen is my favorite book on tarot. It is so comprehensive. I mean, it's huge. There's anything and everything you could ever possibly want to know about tarot. So I always recommend that to somebody who's getting a little bit more serious with their tarot practice. I would not recommend it to a beginner though. If you are a beginner, definitely get another book that's a little bit more beginner friendly, like this Ultimate Guide to Tarot Card Meeting. Oh wait, what does it say? The Ultimate Guide to Tarot Card Meetings. Yes, that one is a pretty good book for beginners. It's really easy to use, but that holistic tarot book, that's one that you definitely want to get once you start getting a little bit more serious. And then I also have some numerology here. I have some runes and also reading the tea leaves. I love that book on the top. It's called Reading the Leaves. So if you're interested in tea leaf readings, I thought it was excellent. I've read maybe like 4 or 5 books on reading the leaves as far as tea leaf reading goes, or tasseomancy or tassiography, however you want to say that. And this one is probably my favorite so far. The other ones I read, I didn't really care for. So definitely check out this book if you're looking to get into that. Over here, we have all my books on sigils and chaos magic, which I have also already talked about all these books because I did a video on chaos magic and I talked about the books I would recommend for that and why. Also, what is chaos magic? So I'm going to link below. What am I linking below? The Occult 101 video, the Kabbalah video, and the chaos magic video. So I'll have those all linked in the description box if you want to check those out. I also have a video on sigils where I've already talked about those books. So not going to go into detail on those. So now we are moving to the lower shelf here. So there's some books that I haven't read yet on this shelf, and I'm really, really excited to deep dive into them. But let's start with the left side first. So we have, I'm not going to read all the different names, but that Rebel Witch book was really interesting. I did a quick read of it. I haven't done a depth read. I do a quick read on all my books, and then I do a deep read to really do all the exercises and take my time through the book. But I liked what I saw from the quick read at least. And that book is by Llewellyn Maddox, and she actually has a YouTube channel. I love her. She is excellent for shadow work, self-development, tarot. She does a lot of tarot. So if you're interested in those subjects, definitely go check out her YouTube channel. But I really love her attitude towards magic as well, because she's kind of a self-described chaos witch, which is very similar to my style of magic. I'm a chaos magician, so I can really appreciate her style when it comes to being really creative and thinking outside the box. So thought that book was pretty good. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, The Witch's Path by Thorn Mooney. That is an excellent book for beginner witches. It is so good for beginner witches, so definitely recommend that. And then we have all of Aiden Wachter's books. We have Six Ways, Weaving Fate, Changeling. I did a whole book review on those if you want to check that out. Aiden Wachter has a really interesting way of writing, and I really appreciate it. I love, love, love his style of practicing magic. It's very eclectic and very abstract, which is kind of how I practice, not traditional at all. So I loved that. And then you can see there's a lot of witchcraft books. Let's just kind of speed through some of these. What's next on my list to read is that Hex Twisting book. I am really, really excited to read Hex Twisting. So excited for that. I just finished A Broom at Midnight. I also have already discussed that book. I'm being really repetitive right now. I apologize. I've got some books on deities. There's Ceridwen and the Morrigan. 2 books on Druidry and Hedge Witchcraft. Oh, you know what? This book right here, this Living Magic book by Frater UD, I am so excited to read that book. I might actually read that book before I start Hex Twisting. That one I think just came out in 2021. I know nothing about it, but I saw it at a used bookstore and I snagged it because it looked really, really good. I'm really excited to look into that a little bit more. And then of course we have The Spiral Dance. That's a classic, very Wiccan based, and the complete book of amulets and talismans, grimoire books. And then I have this whole section on Scott Cunningham. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his books. And it's so funny too, because I am not a Wiccan. I've never been Wiccan, but obviously Scott Cunningham was a Wiccan. And so his writing style obviously is very Wiccan. And a lot of people are turned off by that because if you are not Wiccan, typically you're seeking out books that don't have that Wiccan influence in it. But I don't understand why, because even if you aren't Wiccan, you can still appreciate what's written in the books. Just take it and customize it, customize it for your personal practice. Take what you want and then leave what does not resonate with you. So I really like Scott Cunningham's writing style. I think it's really beautiful. It's kind of like a lovely introduction to witchcraft. So I still recommend Scott Cunningham to beginner witches, whether they are Wiccan or not. And I know that's very, very controversial right now. So next we have, this Death Nesting book. So this is by Anne-Marie Keppel. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. I cannot wait to read that. I haven't read that yet. And Death Nesting is all about becoming a death doula and being able to cross over to the other side in a more peaceful, loving, accepting way. I'm probably really butchering this book right now because I haven't read it yet, but I'm really, really excited to read it. Recently, I have been really attracted to the idea of becoming a death doula because I feel very attracted to death. And I know that's kind of a weird way to say it, but I feel like it kind of follows me, and not in a creepy way, just in a way that I think it's intertwined with my purpose. I think about death quite a bit, and I want to be able to help people pass over to the other side without fear. There's a lot of fear in our culture about death, and I don't believe that we talk about it enough. So anyways, this Death Nesting book, it is called Ancient and Modern Death Doula, and again, that's by Anne-Marie Keppel, just right in the center there, and I definitely recommend that. Even though I haven't read it yet, my coven mate referred this book to me, and I believe she actually knows the author, and she's read this book and recommends it, and I trust her recommendation, so I'm throwing that recommendation out there. And then we move to the rest of the books on this shelf. So I have not read that ritual book yet. I think it's actually more psychological. I have a lot of psychology books that we'll get to towards the end of this video that I feel like would be really helpful for anyone's magical practice, but can't wait to read that. Then we have The Secret Teachings of All Ages. This is an old book. I can't remember when it was written, but when you read it, it's almost difficult to read because the language, obviously the language of English changes over time with the culture. And so a lot of people recommend this book to beginner occultists, and I do not. I do not recommend this book to beginner occultists. Unless you're used to reading really philosophical books that are extremely dry. If that's you, then The Secret Teachings of All Ages, go for it, because it is kind of a foundational book that's referenced in so many other occult texts. But at the same time, like if you are not that person and you do not enjoy really dry books that are extremely philosophical, don't read this book. I personally didn't love it, but I'm keeping it because I am really forcing myself to reread it. So it's probably time for me to reread this book, honestly. I think it deserves a little bit more attention than I have given it, but it's one that it circles around the occult community, and a lot of people recommend this book. I don't know why. I don't know why it's considered a staple, but it is. And then we move on to, Christopher Penczak's Inner Temple of Witchcraft. I just finished that book. So good. So good. And honestly, I don't know why I haven't read this book sooner. The Inner Temple of Witchcraft, I feel like, is a staple in the witchcraft community, yet I just recently read it this year, you know? So it's funny kind of going back to these books that are considered staples and reading them. Definitely recommend that. I think some people might be turned off because I think there is a Wiccan influence in that book as well. But again, I mean, all books have golden nuggets of information usually that it can be useful to your magical practice. And if you're not Wiccan, leave what doesn't resonate with you, but there is so much stuff in there that I really enjoyed. He has a whole chapter on the science of magic and then a whole chapter on the magic of science. So I really liked that. I can't wait to read he has a whole series. He has the Inner Temple of Witchcraft, which I have here. Then he has the Outer Temple, and I believe he has like a Temple of High Magic or a Temple of Shamanic Witchcraft or something like that. There's a whole temple series, and I haven't read the other ones yet, so I'm excited about that. Then we have the Beginner's Guide to Alchemy. If you're interested in alchemy, I thought it was a lovely introduction, and it's very thin, so it's easily digestible. Definitely recommend that. And then what do we have? Oh, some art books towards the end, some occult art, I suppose. But okay, let's move on to the next bookshelf here. You know what? I apologize. We have to go back to the first bookshelf because I did not talk about Psychic Witch. I love Psychic Witch. Anybody who knows me in my personal life knows that I'm absolutely obsessed with this book. I've recommended it, I think I did a video for the 10 beginner witchcraft books that I would recommend, and Psychic Witch was the first one that I recommended on there. And it's written by Matt Oren. He actually saw my video and then friended me on Facebook, and I was like, wow, that is really cool. So Matt, if you're ever watching this book, I am recommending your book yet again. I think it is the #1 book that I would recommend to any beginner witch. So if you are a beginner witch, definitely get Psychic Witch. He really teaches you how to manipulate energy and how to control your own energy. A lot of people think it's just about developing psychic abilities, and although this book is basically for developing your psychic senses, it's so much more than that. It's such a foundational book for spell work because you have to understand your own energy. You need to know how to direct your energy, how to manipulate your energy, etc. And he teaches you that in the Psychic Witch book. There are tons of exercises in there, and I really feel like every single witch needs to read this book or have this book or something. So I love the Psychic Witch book. Now we can move on to this next shelf here. So this is kind of where we get out of witchcraft and ceremonial magic and kind of move more into just like spirituality, new age, a little bit of Buddhism. I was a Buddhist for 5 years, so I do have a lot of Buddhist books, but we have the Encyclopedia of Spells. That's still pretty witchy. This book is huge. It has, I think it's like 5,000 spells in it or something. I like it. I wouldn't say that it's my #1 go-to for literally everything because I don't really follow recipes. I am really out of the box with my magical practice. I'm so far down some weird rabbit holes. I really make up my own stuff. So I don't particularly follow recipes for spells, but if you're looking for some inspiration or something in your magical practice, it's a nice book to have, definitely. It's broken up into intentions, I believe, and you can kind of look through it. And if you need a love spell or something, or a money spell, you can at least look through it and get some inspiration, and then build your own spell based on, you know, what you read in this book or other books. That's what I prefer doing. I like looking at what everybody else has going on in their magical practice, and then you make it work for your own magical practice, you know, take what works. Yeah, then we get into some Eastern philosophies, New Age spirituality, things like that. I've recommended that book like 50,000 times on my page or my YouTube channel. The Eastern Body, Western Mind, best book on chakras ever, 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 ever. So good. Love that book. And then we've got some books on shadow work as well. So yeah, I'm not going to really point out any particular books here, even though I love all of these books, because they're not as occult related. They're more spirituality based. I'm not really going to deep dive into these, but I do think that these are all phenomenal. I do, however, want to recommend Dr. Joe Dispenza. So he has a series of books. You can see kind of in the center here, You Are the Placebo, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Evolve Your Brain, and Becoming Supernatural. Dr. Joe Dispenza, he does a lot of research on epigenetics, neuroplasticity, meditation. He is leading the charge on a lot of new discoveries. And honestly, I found his books to be so helpful in shaping my magical practice. So I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, start with this book, the You Are the Placebo book. It will change your life. I'm not even kidding. Please read it. Even if you aren't familiar with neuroplasticity and epigenetics, he explains it in a way that a beginner can actually understand. And he shows how you can literally change the structure of your brain. And it actually gives an explanation, at least to me, how magic works. And his books, they aren't on magic at all. In fact, he doesn't even mention magic or witchcraft or occult content or anything in his books. His books are very scientific, but it's so out there that I feel like every occultist, every person that practices magic needs to read one of his books. Absolutely, hands down. So start with the You Are the Placebo book, and you can learn really how to manipulate your own mind, how to change your brain structure. He goes into how to meditate properly. It's so important, so important. So I definitely recommend this book. And I also find that there are a lot of books that aren't necessarily occult related, but gaining that knowledge really does help you develop a successful and efficient occult practice. So that's why I'm kind of recommending these additional books here that aren't necessarily magic based, because I really feel like they can help people with their magical practices. And then of course, towards the end here, we have more spirituality, New Age. Thich Nhat Hanh, he is my favorite Buddhist writer. I have a lot of his books. His book, No Mud, No Lotus, is actually the reason why I have a lotus tattooed on my back. I've got like a full spine tattoo. It's very Buddhist based. But anyways, I love Thich Nhat Hanh. The books are excellent. So if you are interested in getting into Buddhism, just look for him as an author and then pick any book he's ever written, and they're all phenomenal. So he is absolutely my favorite. Moving on to the big bookshelf, this top shelf here is just fiction. So I'm not going to be really going over my fiction books here. That's not even my entire collection of fiction, honestly, but we don't need to go over that in this video. So let's move down to this second shelf here. This is going to be psychology, philosophy, a little bit of spirituality, but it's really mostly psychology, philosophy, and shadow work, I would say. So I'll just pick out some of these books here that I think would be helpful for a magical practice. The 48 Laws of Power, it's the one second from the left. It is very orange. The 48 Laws of Power there, I find is really, really useful in learning how to use the art of manipulation in your spellcraft, even though this book has absolutely nothing to do with magic or the occult or anything like that. Definitely check out the 48 Laws of Power if you haven't read it. It really helps you figure out how to be an effective manipulator for sure. And I also really love this book, The Body Keeps the Score, right next to it. This one is a lot more for shadow work. I would use this in shadow work. I would use this for psychological healing. Excellent for somebody who has PTSD or BP COPD or any other, mental health issue that they really want to help tap into and heal. So definitely recommend that. Also, I don't know what my dog is doing in the background. I am so sorry. I think he's like licking the floor. I don't know. And then moving across here, I mentioned the Alice Miller books in my shadow work series. Excellent for shadow work. Alice Miller is so foundational for shadow work for sure. And then we get into more philosophy. I love these little, you can see the rainbow books here. These are excellent for beginners if you're just getting into, it's called Knowledge in a Nutshell is the series. And so I have one for Carl Jung, I have one for Freud, Enlightenment philosophy, classical philosophy, quantum physics, and astrophysics. So if you're not familiar with those topics, I find that these books are really, really helpful in introducing you to those subjects. And I feel like in the occult world, Carl Jung is referenced quite a bit. His psychological archetypes are so important. And so he was also potentially a magical practitioner as well, even though he's very foundational in the world of psychology. Most people don't know that he was kind of had his hands in the occult world as well. So that's really cool to learn about. I have a couple other books here about Carl Jung, one of his books, and then one just about him in general. So yeah, definitely recommend those books. And quantum physics obviously is really important in the occult world as well, because it gives a potential explanation for why magic works the way it works and the possibilities of all the things that we can do in the magical world. So I think it's important to get into quantum physics if you have the patience, obviously. And then we got some Hemingway over there because I'm a sappy girl and I love poetry. So, shoot me, whatever. All right, let's move down to the next level. This third shelf is all about herbs, plants, homesteading. It's all about like gardening and green witchcraft and things like that. I have a survival handbook as well. We're very much into the homesteading thing right now. We have a huge garden and a compost system, and obviously we're very lucky to have that. We just moved into this house in 2020, so this is a brand new world for us, but we're trying to get into the homesteading life a little bit and to be more self-sufficient. But let's talk about some of the books that I would recommend if you want to get into herbalism, because that is an area that I am extremely interested in as well, and I've done a lot of research on, a lot of continuing education. I would not call myself an herbalist ever. I have not gotten those qualifications yet, but I do consider myself pretty knowledgeable. I love this book it's called the Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicine, that white book in the center here. That is my favorite book for herbal medicine. I love how it's laid out. The pictures in it are gorgeous. It's easy to read, and it has a lot of the science behind plants. So I think that one's kind of a staple if you're looking for getting into herbal medicine. And then we also have Scott Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs, of course. This book is recommended a lot by witches if you're wanting more of the magical properties that are associated with each plant, because the Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicine, this one's just the science behind it. It does not have the magical associations, whereas Scott Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs has all the magical associations, but not so much the science. So it's hard to find a book that has everything. I talked about this occult botany book recently on one of my videos. Excellent book for getting into botany. And we have some more books over here for herbalism. Oh my gosh, now my cat's meowing in the background. It is what it is over here. I'm trying my best. So yeah, and then the rest of these are just like gardening and vegetable books and planners for my garden. And eventually I would love to give you a garden tour of this space because I do so much green witchcraft, but whatever, that's another video. And all the way at the bottom, we have my science section. I guess we can call it science. It's kind of like science and more plants and more natural medicine. So I'm a healthcare practitioner. I have some books obviously on my anatomy and physiology and trigger point therapy. I'm a medical intuitive as well, so I've got some of my med books here from when I was in school. This big book on natural medicine, if you're looking at getting into more like a naturopathic approach to medicine, I love this book. And obviously I'm not a naturopath. If somebody is a naturopath, I'm sure they have a million other books that they would recommend that are far more qualified than my recommendations. But just from a novice who is not not a naturopath, I really love this book of natural medicine. It's kind of like an encyclopedia of every tincture, herb, mixture, whatever that you could use for any physical ailment. And you can see the size of it too. Like, it's huge. I also really love this book, Energy Medicine by Donna Eden. I love the Subtle Body book. Love, love, love it. So if you're wanting to get into more like energy centers and healing yourself, those are excellent books. Oh, and then we have some rock hounding books here because my partner and I go rock hounding all the time, and we go dig out our own crystals from the mountains, you know, and we go along the beaches and look for jaspers and agates and quartz and carnelian and tons of crystals. So got some books on that. And then these are all food books, I think. This is all food. This is some natural, not necessarily cookbooks, but just the science behind food and how it affects our bodies. I did do some continuing education in gut health as well. I'm very, very passionate about nutrition and gut health. I definitely wanted to be a nutritionist at one point. Anyway, so this is the science, planty, natural healing section of my bookshelf. And I just had to show you my dog really quick because he's always like in the background barking, and so his name is Loki. Loki, you want to say hi? Hello, buddy. Anyway, so that's my dog. Let me see if I can go find my cat. And this is the cat. Yeah, she is like having none of my nonsense today. So anyways, those are my animals. Thank you so much for watching this video. It really does mean a lot to me. I'm glad I got to share my personal collection with you a little bit more and a little bit about my personal life. I've definitely connected with some of you through the comments, and it's nice to just be a little bit more homey and myself on my videos. So I appreciate you allowing me to do that, but I hope you enjoyed. Definitely let me know what you thought about some of these books. If there is one book in particular that really stands out to you, I'd be really curious to know your thoughts on everything that is in this video so far. But thank you for watching. I will see you in a video very soon. Have a blessed day.